Good morning. Welcome to your early morning intuitive guidance. Happy Saturday. Sorry I'm a little bit late, but got some interesting stuff to talk about today. So we'll give it a minute as everybody starts to pop on. I want to talk about Good morning, Abigail. You're the first one popping on today. Welcome, welcome. I want to talk about my experiences yesterday in two regards. Good morning, Nancy. Welcome. Glad you're here. Good morning, good morning. And yeah, I think some interesting pieces are going to come together. And as I was getting ready this morning, good morning, Barb. Good morning, Cindy. Some pieces started popping into place, and I ended up with this pithy little saying that actually captured what I want to talk about today really well. And of course, by the time I got downstairs to write it down, can't remember it. So we'll see if it pops in. Good morning, Mel. Glad you're here. It may pop in. If it does, great. If it doesn't, not meant to happen. So we'll go from there. But let's start with some breath. In through the nose. Good morning, Catherine. Out through the mouth. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Allowing your shoulders to drop. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Settling into right here, right now. Wiggling a little bit. Getting the kinks out. And I can certainly tell I was doing a Tony Robbins gig yesterday because everything's sore. He has us moving, jumping around, carrying on to change our state so that what we're learning actually sinks in better and sticks better, which I'm all about that. That's fine. But there were some things that I wasn't all about and wasn't fine with. Good morning, Gwen. Glad you're here. And that's a part of what I want to talk about. So let me grab a little piece of paper here, and I'm going to make a note quick so I don't forget. All right. So let's start with, let me see. A little more breathing, a little more tapping. It'll come in. Because this feels like it's what some people would call channeled information, what other people would call tapping the divine flow. Let's start with the book. So, as you know, I am reading The Chalice and the Blade, and I'm to the part now where it's talking about early Christianity and the methodical removing of the feminine from the texts. And when that information is discovered 1400 years later or whatever it was, still an effort to suppress the texts that talked about women as teachers of men, as divine and holy also, the goddesses in addition to the gods, etc. And again, systemic eradication of all that is female, half of the population, right? And having gone to Wicked, again, there's that, good morning, Beth, glad you are here, that eradication of those we deem as different than, less than, those we other, right? In this case, it's Elphaba for being green and the animals who speak. The animals who speak. Interesting, interesting. So, roll to the Tony Robbins event yesterday, and a divine feminine, and he, historically, he's had a mix within himself of the divine feminine and the divine masculine, and very facile moving between them. There's the time when it's time to say, come on, let's move, get over yourself, let's go. And there's time to say, I see you, I hear you, I hold space for your pain. The last couple of years, I see that latter part being suppressed and the former part being elevated, just like in our society, right? So as I was experiencing the event yesterday, there were several points, at least 3, and interestingly, I have a group of 3 other people, younger people than me, at least 20 years younger, some 30 years younger, that 2 years ago in the spring, in March, 2 years ago at a UPW event for Tony Robbins, Unleash the Power Within, we were put into a chat room together, and we gelled so well that we quick shared email addresses with each other, and we've been meeting once a month since then. And one of those young men was actually emailed me yesterday and kind of asked, how's the Tony Robbins event going for you? And so I made the point that I was having a hard time with this slide into toxic masculine. Name calling, denigrating, othering, a lot of, power over, not pretty stuff. And that I was practicing because I've paid for this event. He has good material. There's things that I want. How do I take the message, but not the messenger at this point? And this is my last event, and it will be my last event. But how do I do that? So he was commiserating with me, and he said that at the last event he attended, he also had a hard time with this particular drift in speaking, behavior, etc. So then I juxtaposed that with last night, going to this event, which was the first fundraiser for a group called Gateway Collective. If you want to look them up, look them up. If you want to make a donation, make a donation. What I love about them is they're doing something different than what everybody else is doing in terms of addressing the housing crisis. And so they've taken an old mall, the downtown mall in Green Bay, and converted it to housing. And it has a restaurant space on the first level that can be used for events. Good morning, Carolyn. Glad you're here. It has a variety. It's a cool building. And so they took us on an immersive tour. So groups of us, we walked through the whole building. It took 70 minutes. It's a big building, lots of apartments. And they showed us through various styles of apartments, and they also had actors in some of the apartments playing out little vignettes to help people. And this was a pretty well-heeled group who was there, which makes total sense because they're looking for donations to keep their project going. What sets this project apart is that they didn't take any government funding to build this thing out. So it's all private donations. They've worked, glad you're here, Carolyn, glad you're here. They've worked very hard and diligently to make this thing fly. And what they're working to create is mainly housing. They've got some housing for the people who are at the 30% area median income level. I think 30% of the apartments are going for people who earn 30% of the area median income. But they're really focusing on what they call the workforce housing, excuse me, who make just a little too much money to qualify for any funding, but not enough money to survive. Not enough money. So the people who are making maybe $20 an hour, our area, $24 an hour is what's needed to survive, to have housing, to not be spending over 30% of your take-home pay on housing, but they don't qualify for any government funding for any of the programming, right? Section 8, any of that stuff. So that's the group they're really targeting. And then they have 30% of the apartments that are market rate, because you need the market rate apartments to carry the 30% apartments, because every month as the the group running this thing, they lose money on the 30% apartments. People have to have housing, but the group that's doing this loses money on those. So you need the market rate housing to carry the other ones. Other interesting things that they have, the person who owns the mall still owns the mall. This group built out the mall, so they put the apartments in, but they don't own the building. So there's all these different creative ways they've gone about how can we make this work. I, of course, was very interested in this because our project hit the wall with we're not being advanced for government funding. And a huge percentage of these kinds of projects relying on government funding to happen. The need's still there. We'd still need much housing, but because we weren't quite in the right neighborhood anymore, they've changed the rules, we don't qualify for this funding. I now believe this is the best awful thing that ever happened. And that's why I titled this one Synchronicities. First of all, because these kinds of things unfold. Second of all, because all of these things I'm talking about today occurred together in a short span of time to really help me see this is what's going on. This is what's going on here. I can call this. I can label this now. I can say this is what's happening. Because I will guarantee you a bunch of the people, there's 6,000 people, either there's 3,000 in person and there's 3,000, good morning, Linda. Well, good evening, Linda. Glad you're here. There's 3,000 online, I'm online, attending this Tony Robbins thing. And I will guarantee you there were a bunch of people, it's their first event or they're drinking the Kool-Aid or whatever, who are thinking it's okay that this toxic masculine way of being is occurring. Me, it being juxtaposed against what I'm reading in the book, what I saw at this other event last night, etc., makes me say, this isn't okay. This isn't okay. And again, I'm going to take the messages that fit for where I'm headed. There's good material here. And I'm going to leave the rest. I'm going to leave the rest. And I'm going to do things like this. Speak up about what's going on here. This systemic effort to suppress the divine feminine as opposed to creating balance between the divine masculine and the divine feminine. I'm not saying ditch the divine masculine, but I'm saying pull it out of its toxic hole and clean it up some, and let's have a balance between that divine masculine and the divine feminine. So if we think about the characteristics of each, so there's the push, pursue, do, etc. There's the open, receptive, tend and befriend. There's the lone wolf on the one side. There's the community on the other side. Can you see how having both is valuable? We don't want to denigrate either one. We don't want to dump either one. We want both. And we want them both elevated, right? When we see a ton of violence against women, against minorities, against people who are differently abled, against black, brown, whatever people, against trans people, all of the groups that are the out groups right now, when we see that violence happening, that lets us know we are way out of balance. We are way out of balance. And again, I believe when I heard this quote, I'm like, oh yeah, the dying donkey kicks the hardest. This is on its way out. This ruling class that makes the decisions for everybody, it's on its way out. But it's going to crash and burn in a big way. And one way to look at what happened politically here is that both parties, the fact that there's just two viable parties says something pretty loudly, right? If Kamala Harris had won, I believe, we would have lingered longer in these institutions that are not working, that don't, I mean, which one's been highlighted recently? The insurance industry, right? How common it is. How many of you have had claims rejected and had to go back, right? And what I read in Heather Cox Richardson is, and I have cousins who are the ones who evaluate the claims, and they've told me, yes, we're told to reject a certain number of claims. And the value of doing that is 0.2% of those who have their claims rejected will challenge it. The rest of them just get buried in medical debt. Let that sink in for a moment, right? One of the richest countries in the world, and we have people mired in medical debt, right? People who kill themselves over their medical debt. So, untenable situation, right? And had Kamala won, my opinion is we would have continued longer in this paradigm that really doesn't work, that really isn't healthy for the vast majority of us, right? Yes, Heather is a great voice of reason. Yes. So for those of you who don't get her daily email, Heather Cox Richardson, and there's times when she's struggling recently with what's going on. And so you can hear a little more in her words, but still, I think a very valid perspective, a historical perspective, a very wisdom-based perspective. Anywho, let me think, where was I going with that? Yes, so given that Trump was elected instead, I think it is going to blow up a whole lot of stuff. A whole lot of stuff. And we'll see some of these institutions that need to crumble ostensibly in a very different way than they probably would have crumbled had it gone the other way. But done is done. This stuff isn't working. We're going to need new things. And the new things that are coming, I believe, are going to rise up outside of the systems that we already have. Okay? So we'll see how it goes. Is it going to be messy? I think it's going to be very messy. Is it going to be painful for a lot of people? Yes, I think it's going to be painful for a lot of people, especially the have-nots. So this can be a place where, kind of like the event last night, we rise up and support those who have less to get us all through this mucky, miry period until we get some things that work better. They shared a video of, and we went to all these rooms, watched these little vignettes of people struggling to pay bills, etc., and how when some of these things, like the apartments came into being, it actually helped some people dig out of the hole, right? So a mom or a dad could be home with a kid when they get home from school rather than having to work 2 jobs just to keep the roof over the head, right? So at the very end, we met with a wonderful man named Eugene who talked about his job in this group. He's the one who meets with people who are applying for the apartments and talks about a bigger picture of what's needed here. Let's say they are struggling to maintain full-time employment because they have a kid at home and can't stay at work, and then they get fired and whatever, creating the systems that will support them so they can maintain a full-time job, etc., etc. So he was very passionate talking about his job. Loved hearing him talk about his job. So at the end, we're all down in the restaurant area. There's a video played of an elderly man of color who's talking about having literally been born in a Wisconsin prison. Both his mom and his dad were incarcerated. He was born in prison. His mother died 3 days later from childbirth. His grandmother came and picked him up at the prison as an infant and thus began the shuffling around in his life, blah, blah. And at the age of 16, he's involved in a gang, all the things, right? Life is not going well. And as an adult, he then has a couple of children, but he's concerned about his oldest, who now is 16, and following the same path, bringing guns to school, running with gangs, blah, blah, blah. And a man steps in, has been mentoring this older man who's now no longer incarcerated, helping him blend back into society. And the man who was incarcerated talking about his 16-year-old son and his concerns, etc. And this man who's mentoring him and his wife bring this 16-year-old into their home. Long story short, this kid ends up finishing high school, going to college, getting a social work degree, and he was Eugene that we had met upstairs. And then they did an interview, the woman who is the brains behind this whole project, and Eugene, about his life experiences and the differences it made and why he's so passionate about his job, because he's now doing for others what was done for him. So, again, to me, much of this is the divine feminine approach. This man and his wife taking Eugene Jr. in, that's a tend and befriend. That's a mentoring. That's a divine feminine behavior. So, bringing this all together, synchronicities. There's reasons why the things that happen together. And the juxtaposition of all of these different events and readings and experiences are leading me to the place of needing to speak out more about why we need a shift, beginnings of what that shift might look like. Again, my feeling is it's not going to occur in the systems we already have, but it's going to come from without. And this particular endeavor, building housing without government funding, having the mentoring, etc., is one piece of this puzzle. So, making more people aware of this piece of the puzzle. So if you wanna Google them, it's Gateway Collective in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and learn more about what they're doing. We want to support the stuff that breaks the mold, that doesn't maintain what we don't want, and lift up the things that are forging new paths, right? So, all that to say, interesting times we're in, interesting times likely to come. The more we can hang on to a bigger picture of some of this calcified toxic masculine stuff has to implode, this extractive stuff that screws over ordinary people has to implode in order for the phoenix of the new to rise. Yes, and there's much beginning to be out there. There's, what's the name of the one group that I get their emails? It's something city. I'll look it up and I'll put it in our feed. But they lift up all of the things like this that are going on so that we can see, oh, well, if they're doing this in Baltimore, we can do this here. It's really cool stuff. Good morning, Kelly. Glad you are here. We're just about done. I've been yakking really long. But it's good stuff. It's good stuff. And again, when we link arms with each other and whisper in each other's ears, we're going to make it, this is okay. This needs to crash and burn. How can we support the people who are struggling because it has crashed and burned? How do we move through to something new? The more we can tend and befriend, the better off we're all going to be. So, have an awesome Saturday. I'll see you again tomorrow. We'll see what I have on my little brain at that point. Remember, you're capable of far more than you think you are. Bye.